All right. Should we talk games?
I think it's probably about time to talk games. We're going to get into our Week 10 previews and picks against the spread. We're going to start with that game we were talking about a little bit earlier. Number 4 Ohio State goes on the road to Happy Valley to play number 3 Penn State. Ohio State favored in this game by 3.5 points. I'll set the table with this, and then we can get into the discussion. James Franklin in his career, 1-12 versus top 5 teams. At Penn State, he is 1-8 versus top 5. Ryan Day is 2-6 versus top 5 teams. James Franklin has lost 7 straight to Ohio State. For both of these coaches, this is literally the thing they can't do, right? Like Ryan Day cannot beat top 5 teams. James Franklin's also worse at trying to beat top 5 teams, and he can't beat Ohio State. So where we at?
Right. So somebody is going to improve their record by default, right? Somebody has to win this game, and someone will look better in this situation. It is kind of crazy to me how Penn State has performed against Ohio State in that stretch, because I feel like I've covered so many of those games, and you come out of them, and the story is, how do you close that gap? You can beat almost everybody on your schedule, but you can't beat Michigan. You can't beat Ohio State. What's the difference? You have the talent, you're recruiting at the level, you're developing, you're putting guys into the NFL, but you're not able to win those games. And obviously there's been times where it's come down to coaching decisions on the field and strategies. There's been times where, again, you've seen a lot of different offensive coordinators come through Happy Valley because of the play calling or the style of play that they've had offensively. But it's absolutely ultimately comes down to the head coach. The preparation for these games, the execution in the games when they matter. And honestly, a lot of those times against Ohio State, these games haven't been all that close. And I think that's the bigger concern over the course of James Franklin's tenure. It's going to be a really interesting game because we don't know for sure what Penn State's quarterback situation is going to be. Drew Allar is a game time decision. We saw him come out of the game last week against Wisconsin. He had the towel over his head for the second half. Bo Pribula led the comeback and did a nice job, I think, for Penn State to win that game and to give them some confidence coming into this one. We talked about Ohio State's injury issues across the offensive line. What is the offensive line going to look like? Who's going to be at left tackle? Are you moving some of your best interior players over to take care of certain issues? We'll see what that looks like and what that means for the run game. But ultimately, this is about legacies. This is about coaches that both have different things that they're playing for. Penn State has been the poster child of the 12-team college football playoff. They would be the team over the last 10 years that would have made the playoff the most, that never made it in the 4-team era. There's so much pressure for the Nittany Lions to get there in year one without those roadblocks. They don't have to play in a Big Ten championship game. They don't necessarily have to beat Ohio State. They don't have to play Michigan. They don't have those the 10-2, the 2 games that are going to block them from accessing the playoff. They need to get there in year one. And then Ohio State needs to play for a national championship. They poured so much money and resources into this roster. Guys came back for this. They came back to beat Michigan and to play for a national championship. So you have both of those things as the backdrop to a game and a record for these coaches that they don't typically win these games. And these are the ones that you need to win to accomplish those goals for this season. I don't know who I give the edge to. I know we're going to pick this game, Joshua. But all week I have gone back and forth and back and forth on this one because, you know, I do have concerns about Penn State. I think sometimes they're too reliant on Tyler Warren. I know he's been the best player on their offense, and they've used him in a number of different positions. And I think that they would in this game, although you'd also got to think that Ohio State is prepared for Tyler Warren to be all over the field. I would like to see the running backs get much more involved for Penn State in this game. I feel like we say that every single week. Yes. But, you know, this is also the type of game. This is why you brought in Andy Kotelnicki, and you wanted to make this offense more creative, have more motion, have more different looks that you're going to throw at a defense that you have typically struggled against in Ohio State.
I'm with you. And to that point, Bo Pribula becomes the guy in this game for me. And this is not to say that Drew Allar is like not a good player, like obviously very good. It feels like Bo's skill set fits more of what Andy Kotelnicki wants to do. He's got better movement skill. You talked about all the motion and then all of the different pictures that the offense can create. I think having a quarterback that can really lean into that helps. And to your point about the running backs as well, I think it only helps elevate their run game if they have a more mobile quarterback in there. Obviously, if Allar's ready to go, I think they're going to roll with him. He's been their guy. He's been very productive this year. He's had some big moments on the road at USC in a comeback. Like, I know they trust that, but playing at home, I don't think it'd be the worst thing ever if you're like kind of leaning on your backup quarterback who's got some pretty good skill there to put defenses in a bind. Outside of that, I look at Penn State's defensive front, and do we know if Deni Dennis Sutton is what his status is for the game?
I don't know.
I think
and James is always a little bit
Yes.
cagey about injuries.
Yes, that's going to be a huge deal because if they got both edges ready to go, him and Abdul Carter, it's going to be a long day. Like, it's going to be a long day for Ohio State's offense. I think Penn State's secondary is not extremely fast, though. And the one thing that we saw from Ohio State was they got the deep ball going a little bit. So I think that could be one of the differences in the game. Honestly, I'm not very confident in Ohio State. I might be thinking a little bit emotionally here, but they're going on the road into Happy Valley as a 3.5-point favorite. I still think that they could win. I also think they could just like win by one, and Penn State could cover that. And to circle back to the head coaches to finish this one out for myself, I do think there's pressure all around for both of these coaches, but like James Franklin does not have to win this game. And I think the whole point of the 12-team playoff is that you would like to see him win it because it would give you confidence, but he does not have to win it. And he's got all of the margin for error. And I think Ohio State's playing with fire here. Like, do I think a 2-loss Ohio State team gets in? Yes, probably. But now you don't have any buffer. You got Indiana still, who I think is a great football team. And your team is probably not going to feel confident as they head into the postseason with a 2-loss regular season. And then this will answer the question, like, is it Ryan Day? Can you not beat top 5 teams? Was like Penn State the only reason you were able to beat them is because they weren't a top 5 team? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of pressure in this one, but I certainly think it leans toward Ryan Day. I would take Penn State. I'm gonna take Penn State in the points here.
So I am going to take Ohio State because it is a must win, because the back's against the wall. And I think they can't continue to play as poorly as they have. And this is,
they can.
Well, they can, but this is a team that they've had their number, regardless of where the game is played, regardless of, how talented Penn State is. I have to think that Ohio State is going to do this because, to your point, sure, maybe you can get in with 2 losses, but you need to have some marquee wins there. And you can't just lose all your marquee games. So I think they're going to win this one, but they do need to be able to run the ball. They need to be able to, protect Will Howard. I also think ultimately, Penn State doesn't really have a very strong receiving core. They basically only
those guys are not good
to Tyler Warren. So maybe it comes down to Penn State receivers versus Ohio State secondary.
No, Ohio State secondary looks like they're cookable though.
Well, that's possible. I mean, and look at these numbers for Tyler Warren this season. He's got almost 600 receiving yards, 47 receptions, averaging more than a first down per catch. And then look at this graphic we put up here if you're watching on our NBC Sports YouTube page. Jeremiah Smith. We haven't said his name, Joshua. He was not really a factor against Nebraska. He is one of the best receivers in the country. How big of a game does he have to have?
Yeah, he had, like Nebraska was such a weird game. Ohio State only ran 47 offensive plays. He had a touchdown catch in that game. He's been good for one. Wasn't necessarily like, I thought he was going to go over 100 in that ball game personally. Yeah. These two guys are going to be the tricky the tricky matchups because I talked about Penn State and their secondary. I don't think they're like from a foot speed standpoint. I don't think they match up extremely well. So you have to have answers for Jeremiah Smith. I don't know who the hell is going to guard Tyler Warren. And he makes it really difficult because he lines up in so many different spots they can create matchups. Like they can put him all the way outside and have him lined up against the corner, and just you could throw it up to him. And that's a really difficult matchup. You could also get him kind of in a matchup zone coverage on a linebacker who he's a way better athlete than, or a safety who he's going to be bigger than. I mean, I don't want to be either one of the defensive coordinators this week because they have challenges.